here we go. I brought some books too, just in case. And I have my notebook to write down stuff that you're reading.
You know, it's funny. I went to my bookshelf to pull off books, and I was like, I don't have any. I give all my books away. Or I get them from the library. So, like, there was nothing there. Like, okay.
No, I love that. All right. So I'm Meridith Russell. I'm the librarian at Lucille Irwin Middle School, and I'm here on a Saturday during spring break 2021 with Miss Saunders. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's been a good spring break. Sun finally came out. We've had lots of snow, but that's okay. Lots of snow meant lots of reading for me anyway.
I know. Did you just curl up on Sunday was the worst day, wasn't it?
Yeah, I did. I read a ton over break.
Yeah, it felt great just to sit there and kind of do nothing for a while. And I love bad weather, so it didn't bother me at all. So I like doing this. I like kids to see that their teachers read outside of school. And so if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your life, including whatever you want, like any books you liked as a kid or a teenager up to now-ish.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a reader. I don't remember not having books and not reading. I've always read. I remember, like, some of the first ones I remember reading were like all of the Beverly Cleary, like Ramona and Beezus and Super Fudge, and like all of those. I read all of those.
Yeah.
I read all of Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie.
Of course.
And my sister and I used to, like, whatever I was reading, my sister and I would then play a game of, we'd be those characters.
That
so we were always
exactly
Laura Ingalls, and we played all the characters and did all of the games that went along with whatever I was reading at the time.
Yeah, that's exactly what my sister and I did, especially with Barbies. Like, we would set up a little pioneer spot for Laura Ingalls, and we had a cow. Yeah.
Nice. And then I kind of got into mysteries. So I can remember, I don't know for sure what grade it was, but I would guess it was probably around third grade. And my mom we were living out in eastern Colorado, a small town called Julesburg. Oh, yeah. And my mom worked at the bank. And so some days after school, I would walk from the school over to the bank, and I would like check in with her. She would know I was there. And then I would go across the street to the library. And it was this big, old, musty building, but I loved it because I would just then go sit in the library and read until she was done with work and came to collect me. And that's when I started reading Nancy Drew mystery books. Mm-hmm. And I can still remember the shelves of the Nancy Drew mystery books. You know, there was like 60 some of them, and she had all of them, and they were all lined up from 1 to 63. And I just started, and I would just read, like I read every single one that year. Like, I just loved them. I was super into mystery books. And so that was, and my sister and I would play Nancy Drew too, of course. And then I found Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. That was a favorite. That might be one of the books I've read most frequently. I've read that one over and over again. And then I don't really remember very much about what I was reading in middle school. I just don't. I'm sure I was reading because I always had books to read, but I don't really remember very much about what I was reading.
Yeah.
I remember in high school, I read a lot of Stephen King and Dean Koontz. My dad was kind of into that sort of horror, scary genre. And so I would read. I've always liked to talk to people about books. So I always like to read things that other people have read so I can talk to them about them. So I would read all of those, and then we would visit and talk about all of those books.
Yeah. I know that about you. I know that you like to talk about books, and I know that you are in a book club, which I want to talk to you more about. Yeah. But I was thinking, with each teacher that I have talked to, they're all reading for different purposes. So Mike Leffler liked to read and escape and be someone else, and Nick likes to learn. Everything he reads, he has to learn, and you read to communicate and share with other people. And I love that. I think that I didn't intend for that. It's just been a really fun thing.
It's kind of happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
I even talk to my poor husband. I tell him about books I'm reading all the time, even if he hasn't read them or has no intention of reading them.
Yeah.
He has to listen to me talk about them because I just need to talk about books all the time.
I know. I love that. So did you always know that you were going to go to college?
Yeah, I did. I knew even when I started high school, I didn't even know I was going to be a teacher.
Okay.
And I would have said, I didn't know for sure that I ended up being a math major, but I wasn't sure. There was a time where I was really, as much as I love to read, I would have considered being a literacy major.
Yeah.
But that kind of got ruined for me in high school. I had an AP lit class, and we read a whole bunch of William Faulkner books.
Oh, yeah.
Which I hated. And I hated the having to find all the symbolism and like interpreting the way someone else, like I want to interpret books the way that I read them, and I was supposed to interpret them the way that someone else
said
intended them. And so that kind of turned me off of that as a major. So I ended up in math. And I read some in college, again, I'm sure, because I always read. But at that time, you're reading a lot of books that you have to read, and for your studies. So I really remember getting back into reading after I graduated from college, and I had moved to Seattle. I was living great downtown Seattle on Lake Union, and I was teaching in a community that was anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on traffic. It was my commute every day was anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half. And so
oh my gosh.
I started listening to books on CD. And I was listening an hour each direction on average. So I was pouring through books.
Yeah.
But I was getting them from a little library branch that was close to the neighborhood where I lived. But I grew up in small towns. And so all of the libraries I had been in were small local libraries.
Right.
And this was, Seattle public library system is huge. There was dozens and dozens of branches, and they had thousands and thousands of books. And so I could get my hands on any book that I wanted, and they would deliver them right there to my little branch library so I could go pick them up. And because I was listening to so often, I was looking for authors who had series, like that had multiple books in a series, because I needed not keep finding books. I needed to find something that would keep me going for a while, because I was busy. And so at that point, I was reading a lot of Michael Connelly, who I still read. I'm actually just started reading this weekend his absolute newest book. So like, this is an author that I'm still reading today. I read James Patterson and Michael Crichton and Robin Cook.
Yeah.
So when I started reading the Nevada Bar series with Anna Pigeon and the national parks. So like, I really was just looking, and again, got super back into mysteries, and I was looking for anything that I could just keep following the same character through book after book after book.
Yeah. And all of those, they have so many books in this series.
Yes, so many. Like, they were so prolific that you could just keep going for hours and hours and hours in the car, which is what I did. Yeah.
Oh, great. And then when did you move out to Colorado, or back to Colorado?
Back to Colorado. Well, I'd been teaching, I taught for 7 years in Washington, and I moved back to Colorado.
Okay.
But after that, just before I moved back, I was given Harry Potter. There's actually an inscription. This is my very first copy. It says, "Happy birthday, Lara, Dawn, and Julie, 1999. So this was my boyfriend's, at the time, their parents, his mom had kind of no one had heard of Harry Potter yet. Like, this wasn't, I know it's hard to imagine a time for most people who are watching this, that there was a time when that not everyone knew who Harry Potter was.
Yeah.
It wasn't. And she'd heard a little bit about it and got me this series for my birthday. And I, of course, fell in love like so many other people.
Yeah.
and read all of it, but I really, she was the first one who got me reading the series. She actually have 3 books, all 3 from her, birthday after birthday after birthday. She got them for me. And I was telling you before, I don't keep books very well. I went to my bookshelf earlier and was like, what can I pull off my shelf? And I was like, well, I don't have anything. I give books away. I get books from the library mostly or on my Kindle, but I give books away like crazy. But this I do have, and between my husband and I, we have actually 3 sets of Harry Potter. But I have my original set that I kept, and then when I was teaching, I bought a set for my classroom, and then he had a set as well. But I remember, Meredith, when I got the final book, The Deathly Hallows. It came, I pre-ordered it. It came in the mail. It was a summer afternoon, probably 3 o'clock or so. I went to the mailbox and I got it, and I immediately walked home and started reading. And I read until probably 2 o'clock in the morning. I probably ate dinner, but I'm sure I read while I ate. Finally fell asleep. And then I woke up the next morning and immediately started reading, and had 2 or 3 hours left that morning, and finished the book in less than 24 hours. And I cried and I mourned that the series was over, but I loved it. That's I remember reading just straight through until I absolutely couldn't keep my eyes open, and then immediately started again the next morning.
Yeah, I remember I did something very similar because we were going camping, and I always take books when we go camping, and I don't even remember buying it. Maybe my mom bought the Harry Potter book or something, and I just grabbed it and was like, fine, whatever, I'll read it. And I remember camping, and I didn't want to do anything else. I thought, this is fantastic. And then when the last one came, I remember waiting for it so much, and with a mixture of excitement and also dread, because I knew it was
I didn't want it to finish.
And then this one I still haven't read because I'm not ready. I kind of know what it's about, but I'm just not ready for it yet. And it's been out for years, but I can't do it. So and then do you have have you seen the big illustrated ones?
You've shown it to me. I don't have it, but they are gorgeous.
They are gorgeous. I have the first 4. I don't know if they've done number 5 yet, but they're so pretty, and I like to have it just out on the coffee table and the kids. But when we go camping, I always take a Harry Potter book every year, and we read it out loud, and it doesn't matter which one. So it's kind of a weird thing to associate with camping.
But for you, it fits. This winter, over winter break, I didn't have a ton of books, and so I read the first 3 again over break, and I intended to keep going, but then other books kind of came up and got in the way. I'm sure I'll go back and reread them again, and I don't know how many times I've read them so many times. I'm not sure how many this would even be, but
And did you listen to them on audio as well?
I haven't ever listened to them on audio.
Well, you might want to try if you go on a road trip or something. I can't remember the name of the man who does it, but he does a great job with all of the different voices. It's fantastic.
I might have to. I do still listen to audiobooks, not as much as I did there for a while, but I do still listen to them some.
Yeah. Oh, neat. So nowadays, or do you want to talk about how you started with your book club, maybe? Or what fits best?
Well, for a while I got when I started teaching, when I very first started teaching, I taught with a textbook, and we weren't reading fun books. And part of me wants to go back and apologize to those kids. I'm so sorry that I made you read textbooks and that we didn't get to read actual books and wonderful things. But when I moved to Colorado, that was a big movement in elementary ed, was that kids were getting to choose their own books and read. And so then I had a while where I just got so into children's literature. By the time I finished, I owned over 300 children's books.
Oh, wow.
And I wouldn't say I'd read all of them, but I probably read most of them.
Yeah, I bet.
And had talked to kids about them. And, I just got I was so into, I even think of Holes by Louisa Carr, and One and Only Ivan, and all of those. I just really read a ton of children's books. And then one of the 4th grade teachers that I was working with at the time, I was going through kind of a difficult time in my life at the time. I was kind of lonely and needed some friendship and friends and support. And so she had been in this book club for a long time. The book club has been around for over 20 years.
Yep.
And so I've been part of it now, I don't even know, probably 10 years, I would guess. So she invited me to join her book club. And so what we do is each summer we get together and we pick the books for the rest of the year. Yeah. And so we'll have our books set out for the next several months. And then we meet once a month at the end of the month, and we go to different people. Well, in non-COVID years, different people host, right. And we go to their house and we, enjoy a meal together. And then we sit down and we start talking. We talk about the books. And,
yeah.
And I think there's a lot of jokes about book clubs that they don't really talk about books, but we actually do. We always talk about the books because we're all readers and we love talking about books. This year has been harder. We've had to meet mostly online in our book club, which, isn't as much fun, but it's still better than nothing. And we're still talking about books. And so that's been really fun. The one for next week is one that I had actually recommended to our book club. I'm super excited to reread it. I read it probably about a year ago, I guess. It's called Book of Lost Friends by Lisa Wingate, I believe. I had read another book by her. Our book club read it called Before We Were Yours that I loved. But the Book of Lost Friends is the one that we're reading this month. And as soon as I finish my Michael Connolly book, that will be my next one to pick up and reread.
Yeah.
But it's, I think partly getting into my book club got me into historical fiction.
Yeah.
That wasn't a genre I had read a ton of. Probably when I was younger I had, and then when I was teaching, I loved getting kids to read historical fiction because I think you can learn about a time in history and still have this fantastic story.
Yes.
And so this is a historical fiction, and a lot of historical fictions today kind of do a parallel story, one that's going on in the present and one that's going on in the past, and you discover things about both by reading the parallel stories. And this Book of Lost Friends is one of those. It was after slavery ended, and the slaves, they were so dispersed, and they weren't able to keep touch with their families and their siblings. They'd often have been sold or kept apart, and they didn't know how to find each other. And so people would go around and they would write. People who could read and write went around and wrote people's names down and anything they remembered about family members. And then they would kind of deliver those to different Black churches or places where they would worship, and then get those announcements and try to connect people to one another, lost family members, which I thought was just a lovely piece of the story. And then, there's an adventure to it as well. And then in the present day, there's a teacher who is teaching her class about the past and history. And so she kind of discovers some of these books of lost friends. And yeah, so I'm excited to reread it, and I'm always excited to talk to my friends about it. It's funny, we don't always like the same books, so you always have a good conversation.
Yeah.
I always think it's interesting. We rate the book after we've had our conversation, we rate the book on a 1 to 10, and it's always interesting to kind of see where you rated the book when you finished reading it, and if that changed after the conversation about the book. And it often does.
Oh, I'm sure.
Often I like a book more and see things and hear things that other people saw in the book that I didn't see or hear.
And then remind me, when you were picking your book, I have 2 questions. Do you come with a couple just in case someone else has that book recommendation? And then are you always in charge of a month? Laura's pick is always going to be March.
No, we always kind of decide. So we often come with multiple people will bring multiple books, and it's kind of a long negotiation. Sometimes we'll even go away for the weekend and choose books together. And it can take us several hours to kind of put our list together and compare books. And We try to balance out a little bit of what we're reading too. So we'll try to pick up a classic maybe or something like that, and make sure we have a historical fiction and something that's a little bit more contemporary. Usually try to pick up a memoir, something like that. But it's kind of a negotiation then to figure out what we're gonna read and when we're gonna read them.
Oh, that's probably so much fun. That's
It's so much fun. And then I walk away because, if everyone brings 2 or 3 books and we
Right.
only are going to read 7 or 8, I walk away with lists. I have lists all around my house of books that I'm going to read. Like I have drawers full of lists of books, but always gives me more books that I'm going to pick out and read. Even if
I like that though, and I'm really excited. And now I have a book recommendation from you because the Book of Lost Friends, that's what it's called, sounds fantastic. And I remember you recommended another book, which I can't think of the name right now, but it was 3 women who delivered library books.
Oh, yes. Giver of Stars.
Yeah.
I think. Giver of Stars.
That sounds right.
I think that's what it was called.
But I have read several books that you've recommended, and I've loved all of them. So now I'm excited to have this one to go and search for.
Yeah, that was Jojo Moyes. I love that book.
That's who it was. Yeah.
But I love anything, again, like I love historical fiction that was just a pack horse library. It was a time that I didn't know anything about or anything about how that got started. And it combined history with love of books. It was a perfect book for me.
It was a perfect book. I enjoyed it so much. And then I gave it to my mom and my sister read it. And because I am a giver of books too. And I go to the library all the time. And I have a Nook that I do, but I like to buy them and then just give them away. But,
yeah. I like to have physical books, but I do love. I mean, my Kindle saved me during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
When I couldn't go to the library, I could download.
I know.
And not as much as it used to be, but one of my greatest fears is running out of books to read.
I know.
I can't. If you really want to know what I'm reading, there's a drawer in my nightstand that is packed full. Sometimes I can't even get it to close. There's so many books in there of like what's next and what I'm picking up next. And,
yeah, I am in the exact same. But I'll take a picture and send it to you. It's kind of obscene. It's just this huge wire basket full of books, and then next to it are probably a stack of 15 more. And I try to keep it tidy, but usually it's just a mess. And my husband is always like, "What are you doing? You cannot possibly be reading those books." And I was like, "Well, I don't know what I'm gonna feel like."
Right, and you can't run out. Like really, that used to like make me anxious. Like if my drawer was getting close to empty, I would get anxious. I had a student a few years back when I was still teaching elementary school, and Quinn always had a stack of probably 10 books on his desk at any one time.
Yeah.
And he was someone who could read multiple books at once. I tend to very much just be like one book, finish it, and then move on to the next. But he was the same, like he devoured books so much too. And so we would always joke that I'm not scared of snakes or spiders nearly as much as I'm scared of running out of something to read. It would make me anxious.
Yeah.
So thankfully with Kindles now, that's not as much
it's
of
a little bit better. Yeah. So you're reading the Michael Connelly book, and then you're going to reread a book. And then what's after that, do you think?
I don't know what's after that. I just finished, though, yesterday I finished a book that was recommended by Mike Leffler after I watched you guys' book chat. It was Mistborn, The Final Empire. I'd never heard of this series. I loved it. Like I couldn't stop reading it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I got home yesterday. I went away for a couple days for overnight. And then I got home yesterday and, my husband was like, "Hey, you want to go for a walk?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm at 96%. I'll be with you as soon as I'm done. Leave me alone for a few more minutes."
I love that.
I had to finish it. And I already put the next one on hold at the library. Like I got to keep going.
That's great. That is on my list to read as well because he raved about it so much. And Stacy was telling me she probably told you about Second and Charles, or have you already been there? It's a bookstore in Fort Collins.
No.
It's off of Harmony, and Stacy told me about it, and I loved it so much, and I was looking for the book that Mike had suggested. It's a new and used bookstore, and it's huge. There's so many books in there. And then they also have some rare books, and they have T-shirts and vinyls and all sorts of stuff. But I just texted him maybe 2 days ago, and I said, "Have you been to Second and Charles? I think you would love it. They don't have the Mistborn series. Super bummed. But it's a very neat place, and that book is on my list too."
Yeah, I love bookstores. Like I'll just go in, and I usually buy a couple, but I also go in with my phone and like open up my little notes and like write down all the titles of books that I want to get. Because I can't. I read over 100 books a year. I can't afford to buy that many books. So the library is my best friend. But I love wandering through bookstores.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I do. I have some books to maybe share with you of what I'm reading. So, I think she's a downstairs kiddo, but we have a 6th grader named Sophie, and then her older sister is an 8th grader named Isabel, I think. But they were telling me about this series. It's called Caravel by Stephanie Garber. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
I think you would like. So it's young adult, and it's a fantasy world. And they live on little islands, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it, but they live on islands, and there's this magician named, I think, Caravel, and the 2 sisters have wanted him to come forever, and finally they get like a magic golden ticket, and they escape their dad, who's not a great dad, and they go to this magic show, and it's like a little magical village, and what you see is not really what is there. And so I'm explaining it poorly, but it's so good.
It sounds fun.
And it's in the school library, so I'm almost done with this one if you wanted to check it out. Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was neat that a 6th grader suggested this.
Yeah, I had Addie, Kuzmich from a few years ago, was super into Keeper of the Lost Cities, I think is the name of this series. And I just noticed that she would read one after the other, and I was like, well, I always like a good series. And so we talked to her about it, and sure enough, I got reading them, and I don't know if it's I think the 7th or the 8th book came out this fall, and I was super excited when I got it. And it's another one of those that it reminds me a little bit of Harry Potter as well. Yes. Like, she doesn't know that she's an elf until she figures out that she's an elf, and she has magical powers, and she goes to magical school. And
that's almost how I'm wondering this one is there's so much references. The woman, their main character, she sees emotions in color, and I'm wondering if that's where it's leading up to, that she has magic that she's not aware of. Yeah. So I'm wondering about that. So we'll see. And then I'm reading The Cooking Gene by Michael Twitty. I talked about this when I was talking to Nick. It's a journey through African-American culinary history in the Old South. And I thought you would be interested in it because you like to cook so much.
I do like to cook.
So he's just talking about how Southern food is integral to American culinary tradition, yet the question of who owns it is provocative. And so it's a memoir, and he's tracing the roots of his own family, and he does like DNA testing, and then within there he's talking about the origins of soul food and barbecue and how much he loves to cook, and so there's recipes throughout, and it's really interesting.
That's fun.
It's a good one to read and then put down for a little bit because it's not really a story. And then I have one more. Did you ever see the movie or read the book Under the Tuscan Sun?
Yes.
So I love that author. That's Frances Mays. And she came out with this during the pandemic. I think it came out maybe last March or April. And it's like a textbook of the different places of Italy. And it just is so wonderful for travel. It just talks about her favorite food and places to stay. And I know you like to travel. Have you ever been to Italy? You have.
I did go to Italy. I loved it. Can't wait to go back again.
Yeah. So this one is really fun. You could borrow this if you wanted. I don't know that you'd want to buy a big textbook like this, but it's another one where it's just so good for flipping through and dreaming and like someday I'll go and eat some delicious food and yeah. So that's it. Those are kind of my big ones right now that I've been going through. Do your mom and your sister read quite a bit? I think you said yes.
They do. My mom, she does. She kind of goes through phases. Like during the winter, she'll read quite a bit. So she's been reading a lot. She always jokes that I read, 10 books a month, and then I recommend my favorite one for her to read. So she reads a little bit as well. She won't read as much over the summer because she loves to work in her garden and her yard and be outside. But and my sister, she reads some, but she's actually an author. She writes. She unfortunately has not been published yet. She should be. Some of her books are really good. I wish she could get published, but she loves to write more than read, probably. So. Yeah. But I've read most of the books that she's written. I read them. And
how wonderful! What kind of stuff does she write?
Mostly romance novels. And I have a former coworker and friend who is an avid romance novel reader, and so when Janelle was first starting to write, she actually sent a copy of what she'd written to my friend Wendy to see what she thought, and Wendy loved it. Couldn't understand why she couldn't get it published, because she's like, it's so much better than a lot of the romance books that I read. But I don't know. I think it's super hard to get.
I think so too.
To get your book in front of the right person. So now I think she mostly, I don't even know if she's trying to get published anymore. She just writes for fun and enjoyment.
Well, I'm sure it will happen. I have heard that it is incredibly hard, and you just really have to persevere, and I can't imagine being told no again and again.
Again and again.
That you love, that would be really hard. So I understand taking a break and then maybe getting back out there. So
yeah, I would think that would be an incredible job to get to read stuff, for an agent, that stuff that's sent in to you, and try to find that. And I could get a job where someone paid me to read books all day. It would be heaven.
I know. What are your plans for the rest of this afternoon?
I'm planning to finish this. I started it yesterday, and I'm going to finish it by tomorrow because it's really good. So I'm sure I'll have to go take a walk.
Yeah. It's beautiful out today.
It's beautiful outside today. And my mom's birthday was this week, so I'm going to bake a German chocolate cheesecake for her.
Wow.
I don't read a ton of nonfiction. I just enjoy fiction so much more. I read nonfiction about teaching and work and things like that. And I'll read articles about teaching and education. And you mentioned I do like to cook, and so I do read food blogs and look at stuff like that all the time and look at recipes. So do a little baking, do a little reading. But really, my favorite afternoon is to have the dog cuddle up on my lap and reading a good book and just enjoying.
Well, that sounds fantastic.
So many good books to read and not enough time. So.
I know. It's a good problem.
It is a good problem.
Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoy your afternoon. It sounds like a perfect afternoon, and I'm going to do something very similar, actually. We're going to go for a walk, and I do have a little bit of a mess, so I'm going to clean up the mess, and then I will sit and read and sit in it. So
excellent.
Well, I look forward to seeing you.
It was so good talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye.